I broke down once about 2 or 3 weeks still in Normandy. Our lieutenant pulled out his .45 and pointed it at me, and he said, "Get your ass out there and suck it up." Things were moving fast, and there's a war going on. There's no babying, I was a little kid, 112 pounds. But, I was a tough little kid.
Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus. I'm honored to be joined today by World War II U.S. Army veteran George Ciampa. He served in the 607th Graves Registration Company. He's also a veteran of D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge. And sir, it's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you.
Where were you born and raised, sir?
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and we left there when I was 9 years old, and the whole family moved to California in a 1932 Chevrolet.
And when did you join the service?
I went in the service November 23rd of 1943.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I tried to enlist in the Air Corps. I tried 2 times, and my eyes were 20/22, and I couldn't make it. The first time the doctor said, eat a lot of carrots and come back. I tried that. I was working for Douglas Aircraft in El Segundo, working on Navy SBD dive bombers, and felt that I wanted to get in the Air Corps. My brother and my brother-in-law were in the Air Corps, and I thought that was the thing to do, especially after being around those airplanes and towing them out on a tarmac and doing all the finishing touches and sitting in the cockpit. Imagine you're flying one of these things. And so anyway, I flunked it twice. The doctor said, the second time he said, just think maybe he'd get killed if he went in the Air Corps. The way it turned out, I had a close call with death a number of times.
So once you joined, were you originally signed to the Graves Registration Company?
Yeah, I was. I was originally signed to the 610th Graves Registration Company. And when I heard that, I just about flipped, because as a little kid, I had a big fear of death because of a few things that happened in the family that were very emotional. A little cousin, first of all, cemetery burial, very emotional. So I got a big fear of death as a little kid. So when I heard that word graves, I said, oh my God, what are we going to be doing? So we had a regular infantry training in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And then we had to attend a autopsy at a hospital in Denver. And I stood way in the back of the room. But anyway, I got in the 610th, and then I kept trying to figure out how to get out of it. I and another fellow. And it was a bunch of pretty young guys in the 610th. So what happened one day, the base next to us, which was the Army Air Corps base, they came over to recruit pilots, because in March of '44, that's a few months before D-Day, they were really hurting for pilots. And so they lowered the eye requirements. Nobody knows this except me, to 20/30, no glasses. And I knew I could pass that. And so I didn't even check with my company commander. I just signed up and I went through the whole thing. You get letters from your teachers, reference letters and all that. And so they accepted me. They notified the company commander, and he blew his top, and he transferred me out of the 610th to the 607th that was going overseas immediately, and they were short one guy. So I was a replacement. And the guys were all older than I was, so I didn't know any of them. And on the way overseas, they're all kidding me. Don't worry, Ciampa, I can turn the ship around, take you home. Roosevelt said, no 18-year-old will set foot on foreign soil. And that's the fact from his speech. But anyway, of course, I kept going with them, and we landed in England, and it all started from there overseas.
What does the training consist of?
A regular infantry training. You go through the what they call them, the courses.
Right. But did they train you on how to handle the bodies
No.
of time?
No. The only training we got there is a watch autopsy to see a body.
That's the only thing.
That's it.
Okay.
Other than that, it was all infantry training in freezing cold weather. This is in the end of November. This is December, January. Wyoming is very, very cold. You're trying to shoot on the firing range with gloves on, and you're freezing cold, very windy, cold.
Yeah. So then Normandy was the first time.
Well, let me lead you up to that. What happened then is we got to Oxford, England, and then they split up our company. We had 124 enlisted men and officers. They split the company up into platoons, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th platoon and headquarters. And our platoon went to Bristol, England. And then from Bristol, we went to St. Austell, which is at Land's End in England, down by the ports. But before we even got there, we learned what happened to our 1st platoon. They were on an exercise called Exercise Tiger. You can read about it in a couple of books. And Exercise Tiger was a practice landing on the beach that was going to come up. And so we had our 1st platoon, we lost 18 guys. We lost a 1st lieutenant, master sergeant, sergeants, corporals, and 5 privates, ironically, survived. And a couple of them got discharges, Section 8 discharges. And one of them jumped off of a porch. And anyway, they couldn't talk about it. They got put in a barbed wire area and said, keep your mouth shut about this. Eisenhower gave ordered for the officers to be found because they had papers on them showing maps where we were going to land. And so there were almost 800 people, what guys killed. What happened is we had 4 LSTs out there practicing this. They were working with actually live ammunition, like they were landing, But what happened is a German E-boat sunk 3 of the 4 ships, torpedoed them. Almost 800 guys were killed just like that, bam, before the invasion even started. Now we lost some of our friends. We thought, this is no dry run. This is for real. We're in a war. And so it scared the hell out of us. And so then when it's time for us to go to the invasion, we were on a ship and we were out there, and I meet a guy on a ship that was a Navy gunner, my age, took me into his quarters, showed me around. That night while we're sleeping, there's a huge explosion, and the ship is rocking like crazy, and we're all running up on deck from down in the hold where we were sleeping. And come to find out, a German torpedo plane dropped a torpedo to our ship, but it didn't get to our ship. The gunner shot the plane down. And anyway, it caused a huge explosion, so the ship really was rocking. And so that was our first encounter with death. And then we get to the area where there's 4,000 or 5,000 ships. There's different reports on how many were out there. And we were anchored there broadside to shore. And we could hear the German artillery called 88s. They scream. We call them screaming mimes. And as they're going over you, you can hear them screaming. And they're hitting ships. And we can see ships getting hit. And we can see bodies in the water and debris. And then I saw a tanker blow up. And so they had all these targets out there, and they were hitting a lot of them. And so all of us got on the opposite side from the shore on the ship against the bulkhead, the bulkhead is, to get some protection in case our ship got hit from the shore side, and waited to go down the rope ladders. Seemed like hours. I have no idea how long it was. I wasn't timing anything. I had no idea. It was very frightening. We didn't know when we were going to get hit. So then we get into rope ladders and go down, and we get into it. LCI landing craft, that's the smaller one. LSTs, the larger ones. And we got in that, and we started to head in the shore. And we got part way in, and we could hear the 88s screaming over us. And they turned the turned the landing craft around and went back out a ways, and then we started in again, and you could hear that artillery just screaming over us. And I thought for years it was because they thought we were going to get hit, so they kept turning around. But I found out the reason they were turning around, because we went in the third time, is that the Germans had obstacles in the water. And to keep you from, these obstacles, a lot of them had mines attached to them, barbed wire and all. And so when they were trying to keep you from getting into the shore, we finally got in. And then, by that time, I'm pretty damn scared. And I don't even remember getting off the LCI. Can't remember that. And my wife has told me, don't even think about it because it might bring bad memories. But I've thought about it, and all I know is pretty soon we're picking up bodies. And we have a service company attached to us. We were segregated then from black fellows. And so they were in an organization called Service Company. I don't remember the number of the service company, but their job was to dig graves. So anyway, one of our first things we did is pick up paratroopers who landed in the channel in error. Mm-hmm. And there were other errors. There's a lot of errors in war. You lose a lot of battles, but you got to win the war. And that's what it's all about. It's like a football game, halftime, they decide what they've been doing wrong and hopefully win or maybe lose. So anyway, these paratroopers, they were very loaded down, and when a parachute came down over them, they'd drown. And that's what happened. So many of these guys drowned. A lot of paratroopers got shot while they're still in the air. But these guys, we wrapped them in their parachutes and buried them. After a couple of days, we had German prisoners quickly. And so we had the prisoners digging the graves. So these guys didn't have anything to do anymore. That was the end of their work, but they're still over there. So the rest of the war, for 11 months, every day, we established 17 temporary cemeteries throughout France, Belgium, and Germany. And we handled about 75,000 bodies in that time in 5 campaigns, France, Belgium, and Germany. And we picked up, that's Germans as well as Americans, because the Germans didn't pick up their dead, we did. We buried them in separate cemeteries, the same way as we buried the Americans, in mattress covers, 6 feet down in the dirt.
Mr. Ciampa, let's take a quick break right there. We'll be right back on Veterans Chronicles. We're back on Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos, honored to be joined today by U.S. Army World War II veteran George Ciampa. He was a member of the 607th Graves Registration Company, and sir, you were just talking about paratroopers and then collecting bodies of both Allies and Germans on D-Day, and wrapping them in mattress covers in temporary cemeteries. What was the protocol for keeping things organized, identifying soldiers, keeping track of their effects, and so forth?
Okay, well, it's all pretty complicated. But first of all, I was 18 years old. I was a skinny kid. I weighed about 112 pounds. Never been away from home. Couldn't swim. Not that that would help you. But anyway, we were attached to the combat engineers going in. Our company, 2 platoons at Omaha, 2 platoons at Utah. Headquarters came later. So we had to get provisions from somewhere. So we got them from the combat engineers that landed there. And then the protocol in picking these bodies up for 11 months, what we did was you try to determine how they were killed for the paperwork. Headquarters did the paperwork. Where they were killed, how they were killed, when they were killed. And then we had to take the personal effects from them and throw anything that was bloodied away because these personal effects are going back to the families. First of all, they're in a little olive drab bag with a tie with a label on it. It goes to Kansas where it's all processed, and then they send that stuff home to the next of kin. So we didn't want them getting any bloodied stuff. So that's the protocol. Now somebody certainly better pay grade than I was, determined where the cemeteries would be. So they'd pick out a plot of ground, and that's where usually we'd have a cemetery on one side of the road and a German cemetery on the other side of the road. And so we had a code of ethics, nobody took anything that didn't belong to them. And, if you saw Private Ryan, you saw a shot where these guys are all, first of all, they were eating a sandwich, weren't even holding a rifle. It's supposed to be on D-Day. And the other thing was there's a group of guys going through dog tags, and they're reading off the names. Did you see that movie?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Well, I think you have an Italian name, as I do.
I'm Greek, but...
You're Greek?
Yes.
Okay, well, what they were doing is say another WAP when they come to an Italian name.
Mm-hmm.
That shocked me. I was going to write to Spielberg, how they like to say another Jew or another kike or something like that. That was not good, but that's what they did in that movie. Other than that, it was a pretty good movie, probably more realistic than any other, except it showed one landing craft coming in and what happened, looking for Private Ryan. But, there's thousands of landing craft going in, and you're just seeing one little part, which I understand. Yeah, because I do films. I've been doing documentaries for 13 years. I just did a documentary in June about the 75th anniversary of D-Day. I took 7 other D-Day veterans along with American Airlines flying us over there, and I had to raise money for all the other expenses, a lot of them. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying, we weren't eating sandwiches. We had K rations, and you didn't have an officer with the markings on his helmet. No way.
Right. As
they did in Private Ryan. So, it's Hollywood.
Right.
And but anyway, we did this through the stench of it all in Normandy, getting in your clothing. Your mouth is dry from spitting. You sleep in that clothing with that stench, because you slept in my clothes and my boots, in a foxhole if you had one. But anyway, we did this every day with the stench until we got to the Battle of the Bulge. And then you had frozen bodies, frozen ground. Then you had to go through the ice. We had prisoners with jackhammers going through the ice before they could get to the dirt to dig a grave. That land was taken from farmers. And it wasn't until 2 years after the war those farmers got that land back, and all those bodies were put in a permanent cemetery. Those were built in 1947, 2 years after the war. But the temporary cemetery, the last one we had in Belgium, just before we went to Germany, was we had 17,300 buried there, Americans. And from that 17,300, when they were disinterred, they had local people doing that work, and of course paying them to do that work. And they put these bodies in lined caskets. A lot of them were stored because of the weather, with tarps thrown over them, until they could find out from the families if they wanted the remains sent home or remain over there. So 60% of the guys that were killed over there, on the average, were sent home to any cemetery their families designated, free cost. The other 40% remain there. So when you see a cemetery over there, like Normandy, that's almost 10,000 graves, we buried a lot of those guys in temporary graves in Normandy. We had temporary graves in several locations in Normandy. In fact, St. Mary Glees Cemetery 1 and 2, we had 2 cemeteries. There wasn't enough room in one plot of ground. And there was a lady that was the wife of the mayor. She put flowers on those graves all her life. And she tried to get our government to keep those cemeteries as permanent ones, but the government said no. They were all disinterred and put into the Omaha Cemetery. We call it the Omaha Cemetery in Normandy. And so we established those cemeteries. And when I was there in June, they rededicated that land, and they put a new monument there. They had veiled, they had me unwrap it, and it's all in my film. And they did a very good program with singers and soldiers, everything. It was very well done in St. Mary Glees.
Mr. Ciampa, let's take one more break, and we'll be right back with the rest of your story on Veterans Chronicles. We're back on Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos, joined today by U.S. Army veteran George Ciampa, served in World War II with the 607th Graves Registration Company. And Mr. Ciampa, what was your unit doing during the battles? Were you working even as the battles went on?
Yeah, we were in harm's way a lot. We got the croix de guerre from France for what we did, getting there early and doing what we're doing early. Years later, like 7 years ago, I got this medal here, which is the highest medal France gives out, with Legion of Honor.
Right.
And I'm more proud of the croix de guerre medal, and also the Meritorious Service Award medal that we got in the Battle of Bulge, because when that battle started, all our units were withdrawing, combat medics, and we had to stay. And so that's why we got that medal. And none of these are honorary medals. They're all medals for something. And yeah, we were in harm's way a lot. And there were a lot of buzz bombs. The Germans were shooting from launch pads and just hitting anywhere. And one just about got me and my friends. We were in a bivouac area in the woods, and a piece of shrapnel I have at home like this, all jagged, fell right next to my leg here. If it had hit me, it would have ripped up my leg. But we were picking up guys that were hit by buzz bombs way behind the lines on when they're on a we call them piss calls.
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, we did. We had to work a lot in harm's way, and we worked a lot with combat medics. They tended to the wounded, and we tended to the dead. And at collection points where there were guys dying, we were there for that. It was very grotesque work to do. Nobody wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it. I broke down once, about 2 or 3 weeks still in Normandy, and our lieutenant pulled out his .45 and pointed it at me, and he said, "You get your ass out there and suck it up." And that's the way, things were moving fast, and there's a war going on. There's no babying, And I was a little kid, 112 pounds, and but I was a tough little kid. And when Germans were digging graves, I'd stand there and say, "Nix Arbeit and nix Essen," which means don't work, you don't eat. And a lot of them thought they were digging their own grave, and a lot of them, Nazi, me Polski, me something else, But anyway, and a lot of them were, because the Germans had a lot of soldiers in the army from these countries that they occupied. You had to either be in the army or you're dead. So anyway, we had the last cemetery we had was in Germany, about 100 miles from Berlin. And when the war ended in May 7th, then they had a ceremony, Memorial Day ceremonies at the cemetery there in Eisenach. And all those graves had to be disinterred. We had German soldiers digging the graves, disinterring. We had to re-identify the remains. And by that time, it's pretty grotesque. And because you got a dog tag on the body and one on a marker. And at that time, we just had markers or wood crosses. Other graves registration companies came in and put up, instead of our markers, they put in crosses and nailed the dog tag to the cross. So these bodies are all transported from there to Belgium or Holland and put in another temporary grave. A lot of these bodies were put in several temporary graves before they remains got put in the casket. And by that time, 2 years after the war, the remains are bones, and that's when they get it in the caskets and sent home that way. Not like the wars now where they dress them in the uniform, embalm them, and send them home. No way. So it's, but if you go over there, just think when you look at those cemeteries, and if you see 5,000, 7,000, 8,000 graves, that's only 40% of what was there. In Holland, there's 8,300 buried there. In Belgium, there's 2 cemeteries. In Luxembourg, there's 1 cemetery. And in Italy, there are 2. In France, there are about 8 or 9. I've been to all of the all of the permanent cemeteries. I've gone over there every 5 years from the 50th anniversary. Every 5 years, I've been over there. And now to shoot this film that I did, I'm the only one, I think, that did a documentary. And I took 7 other D-Day veterans. I just told you a while ago, American Airlines flew us over. I even flew a major general who was a ranger on D-Day, captain, and he lives in Florida. And they flew him from Florida over with his physician because he's had a couple of heart failures. He's about 97, speaks very well. He's written a good book called Intact about the invasion. And we met him over there because he flew over there with his physician the day after us, and he only stayed 4 days because he wanted to be over there for a ranger reenactment and ranger ceremony, which we covered and interviewed him. And so we had a variation of veterans, paratrooper, combat medics, combat engineers, basically paratrooper. So we try to get a variation of services. And anyway, like I said, I've done, in 2006, I started a 501c3, 100% nonprofit. I haven't realized a dime from any of this. I was only going to do 1 film. It turned into 6. And I took young high school history teachers, 4 of them on the first film, and I took 2 other teachers on the second film, plus combat veterans. And I did a film about the 8th Air Force where I had 8 living members of the 8th Air Force, and most of them are dead now because I did that a few years ago. And some great stories in that film. I did a film called They Will Never Forget, about people who put flowers on graves. They adopt graves of soldiers they never knew except as their liberators. And then the next film I did, the 5th film I did, was about the kids, German kids, because after the war I had to be in the Army of Occupation for 7 months, and I saw these little kids that looked like our kids. They're hungry, forlorn, a lot of them are orphans, and so I thought, I got to go back there and do a film about the kids. So we got about 18 citizens between the ages of 76 and 86 who were kids during the war, who brought pictures of when they were young, and they talked about the interaction they had with us, the American soldiers. And it's a very heartwarming film to hear how they spoke about us. So, the kids got in our vehicles. And that film is a picture of me holding a little 2-year-old German girl on the cover of the DVD, and my Jeep, with little kids in my Jeep. And that was the 5th film. And then I told you about the 6th in Normandy. So I've been doing that for 100% nonprofit. And I've talked to thousands of kids in California high schools, primarily high schools, in France and Belgium, from special needs kids and grammar school kids to high school to college. So I've spoken to a lot of people, and here's my thing. My thing is a high price of freedom. And I saw the high price of freedom, just like other guys doing the job I did, and just like combat medics. We saw what it was like. I mean, when you see thousands of guys your age and a little bit older in every condition you can imagine, you don't forget it. And so when you hear these words, the high price of freedom, you think about the high price of freedom because we saw it. So anybody that saw it is never going to forget what they saw.
There were, I've heard about a lot of veterans who didn't want to talk about the war for quite a while afterwards. You mentioned 50 years was the first time you were back. And from what I've read, you didn't talk about it much. You told me beforehand that your kids hadn't heard you talk about it until you took them over there. Was it because there were memories of the work that you did that you just didn't want to think about?
It's for a lot of reasons, actually. First of all, a lot of guys never went back because they didn't want to relive that. I had a chance to go to the 40th. I didn't want to relive it. I didn't want to go. My wife was still living then. But then, I went with my late wife 8 years before we got married, never talked to her about it. 13 years married, never talked to him about it. The kids never talked to him about it. That's one reason you don't want to relive what you saw. And then the other reason is you're just one of thousands of other guys that did the same thing that you did, or maybe worse. And so it's no big deal, It's something that so many thousands of other guys did, and we lost over 400,000 guys in World War II, which is a whole lot of guys. But when you think about what the Russians and the Germans lost, I mean, a lot more. So the price of freedom is very high. It's not only high for us, but it's high for our allies and our enemy. And these little kids that I went back to talk to these people after they're grown, I mean, they're just like us. They went through the same thing and even worse, because they had to duck the bombs. A lot of their family members were killed. We didn't have that situation here. Nobody here was killed from the enemy. So they had some tough times, and they're just regular people. And, I never thought that I would do what I did after the war, but I had a German girlfriend. And I talked about it to all these young people the other day, and I says, she was on a flying trapeze with her sister and another girl. And we had a platonic relationship, and everybody broke into laughter, Anybody, I remember I used to tell guys, I met a gal, she was in a circus. Oh, the bearded lady? No, not the bearded lady. I had this beautiful girl who was on a flying trapeze. She was 4 months older than I was. And I still have pictures of her out in the garage that I got to dump one of these days. But no nude pictures, there's just a lot of pictures. She was an acrobat, all these acrobatic poses and all. But anyway, and then I had this Jeep, and I got to tell you about the Jeep if I can. You cut it out or leave it in. But what happened was, after the war, I had to maintain a warehouse where all these units are going home, had to turn in all their gear, everything, even medical, morphine, you name it. Nobody was into drugs then. The morphine, nobody took the morphine. But across the road was a vehicle collection yard. The guy came over one day and said, George, could you give me a pair of paratrooper boots? Everybody wanted paratrooper boots. So I said, sure. Can you give me a Jeep? Kidding him. And he said, sure. So he gave me a Jeep. For 7 months, I had a Jeep. Had her name stenciled on the bumper. I used to work one day on, one day off. And she was in Mannheim, Germany, went to Heidelberg, Heilbronn, Karlsruhe, Stuttgart. I followed her around and finally took her home to Frankfurt. And I finally met her father, who was a POW, had been released. But that wasn't until after I left Mannheim to get shipped out. But getting back to the Jeep, one day I forgot to lock it up with a chain, and these guys that kept wanting to borrow it, they took it out. They got drunk in an accident, towed the vehicle into the yard. Company commander, they have to tell the company commander where they got me. So they come to me and said, we had to tell them where we got it. So, okay. So then he chews me out, where'd you get this Jeep? Don't you have stolen military equipment? It was very serious. I said, well, sir, I just borrowed it. I didn't steal it. It didn't go very well. But anyway, he said, I got to think about this overnight. Next day he calls us in. He looks at me. Because of your age and because of what you did for 11 months in the war, I'm going to look the other way. Sterling Carpenter, Lieutenant Sterling, never forget his name. Anyone else, I could have been in Leavenworth for stolen. So I used to go to the gas dumps and put my own gasoline and make out all my I didn't have a driver's license. You're supposed to have a military driver's license. So anyway, after that, shipped out. I'm in Bremerhaven, and it's in December. We all wanted to get home for Christmas. No way we're going to get home for Christmas unless you get on the Queen Mary. Everybody went AWOL. And I got on a train. You had to carry your rifle with you, and that sling down, barrel down, and my overcoat over it. That is now, that's pretty cold, we're in December. And so I get on a train and I go 350 miles to Frankfurt for Christmas. So I spent Christmas with her and his sister, mother and father. And I took her to an American movie, had her father's overcoat on and my rifle hanging down, and had English captions, subtitles. And so we saw that movie. But anyway, it was a tearful parting because she went to the train station with me, and it was raining, and got in one of these telephone booths, looking at each other, and tears. And so here comes the train. Now, if it was a movie, here I am walking backwards to the train and waving to her goodbye.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it was very powerful because it was really good for me because I got a chance to chill out for 7 months and with this girlfriend, and something. If I had gone home right away, I probably would have been a mess, And my sisters told me I used to have nightmares. I don't remember a nightmare. People say to me, "How come you never have PTSD doing that?" I said, "I don't know." When I came home, all I wanted to do is raise hell, go out and have a beer, because when I got home, I was 20 and a half, and I couldn't buy a drink in California. So we have to get people to buy beer for us. So we run around chasing girls, and I did that for 2 years and decided to go to college. Then I went to junior college first because I hated high school. I was little, I wasn't into sports or anything. And so like I say, I wasn't in sports in high school, so I didn't like high school at all. But then I went to junior college because I didn't know if I'd like college, and I loved it. And then I went to University of Southern Cal. They were on TV last night. I watched them, and they pulled out. An exciting game. They were behind the whole game, and they pulled out in the end and won 35-31.
Wow.
Boulder.
Colorado.
Colorado. That's where my kids live. But anyway,
well, Mr.
that's I could go on and on and on, talk to you all day, but I wanted to do documentaries to teach people about the high price of freedom, and like I say, I talk to kids all the time about the high price of freedom. I kind of, with these kids in high school, you got to keep it kind of light at times and joke with them, and so it's not all serious, and you keep their attention. Once in a while, you see a kid sleeping, head on the desk, and you go over, touch them on the head and say, "Hey, didn't you have enough sleep last night?" The teacher loves that, But
what's the moment like for you when they get it, when they understand the price of freedom, and to know that you help them understand?
Oh, yeah, that's happened a lot, where you really get to these kids. Some of them are in ROTC. Where I live in Palm Springs, I've talked to kids in ROTC there a couple of times. When I go home, from now on, I'll be no more documentaries. It's too hard to raise the money. I had to work real hard doing those documentaries. And so I'm going to be talking to kids. And I'll be in my area, Coachella Valley, is a lot of high schools down there. And all these kids at ROTC, and those kids in particular, you really get to them. And once in a while, you'll see a kid with tears. And I'll ask them, "Hey, they'll say sometimes, 'What can we do?' And I said, 'Well, when you see a serviceman or woman out there, go up and shake their hand and thank them.' I said, 'How many of you would volunteer?' And I asked them. Once in a while, you get a kid to put the hand up. Once I got a girl to put her hand up one time. I said, you might get a bonus, sign-up bonus, but would you do that and risk your life? So I impress them as much as I can with the guys and gals that are out there now, because without them, what will we do? And looking at all these kids that I spoke to yesterday, there were hundreds of them there in that auditorium. Boy, they were quiet, listening, and it's just it's good for them to hear this. And I wish there were more guys doing it. I belong to an organization called Freedom Committee of Orange County. It's got about 100 veterans of all wars that speak to kids in high school. And actually, one particular high school, Corona del Mar, right near the coast, they do a great program for about 27 years now, where the sophomore class gets involved with interviewing veterans, and they do a project on it. And it's really interesting what they do. And then after that, about a month or two later, you go to the auditorium where there's 100 of these veterans and the kids that interview them. Usually have 3 or 4 kids come out and interview you. And the kids are there, and they introduce you, and you don't talk. They just, because it's too many. And they do a great program. They start off with the Star Spangled Banner and everything, somebody singing. It's a great program. More schools should do that. It really gets the kids in where they have to do some work on a part of the war you were in, what you did, and then they give you a copy, and they also tape it. They give you a CD, and it's really worthwhile. There's too many kids that don't know anything. I was in a little hamburger place with a friend of mine one day, and I don't remember who the heck it was now, but we got talking about Normandy. The little kid with his father sitting over here in the next booth, and he said, "Hey, were you guys in Operation Overlord?" And I said, "What? What do you know?" That's the code name,
right,
for
sure,
Normandy.
sure.
And I said, "What do you know about that?" He said, "Study it in school." I said, "Are you kidding? Where?" The Lutheran school in Torrance is where this was. Torrance is near Redondo Beach, near the coast.
Okay, sure.
But see, the private schools, they do a little more of that. The public schools, they do. My kids were what they call GATE students. They had college courses and all. They knew nothing about the wars. I mean, talking about World War II or Korea, Vietnam. They didn't know anything. And so when we got over there for the 50th, and my son looks at me, "Dad, you didn't tell us anything about this," because on the bus we had to talk about our experience landing there in Normandy. And so my kids were hearing this for the first time. I've had some very emotional times with talking about it to the kids, or to not so much with the kids, but with other people, other. I've even broken down talking to other GIs, and in a group setting. I spoke to 3,000 people at American Airlines one time, and they have a big program they do there every year to raise funds for wounded warriors. American Airlines is really great with veterans, and they've been very good for me in 4 of my films. And Gary Sinise is a good friend. He's donated money twice to me, and I've gone with him and American Airlines for the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and he was on that plane helping the flight attendants serve food, and we all had first class food. But he's a great guy. He's for real, and if you want to donate, there's so many good causes like St. Jude's that I like what they do for kids and their families. And Shriners is very good. But, there's a lot of 501c3s where they pay out big money to their
executives,
officers, and I don't like that.
Right.
And what Shriners, 99% of it goes to the kids. And the same at St. Jude's, they put up family members that are there, and their kids are in the hospital. There's some really good ones out there. And so I have one of the rare 100% nonprofits. And check out my website, and you'll see the 5 films I've done.
What's the website?
It's called LetFreedomRingForAll.org. FOR. I'll give you a card. FOR. Let Freedom Ring for All. And the reason why I say Let Freedom Ring for All, because at least I thinking this way, that we weren't fighting this war just for ourselves. We were freeing a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I mean, freedom for all. I had a German mayor tell me he's adopted 3 graves at Henry Chappelle Cemetery, and he got these German citizens together for me that were kids during the war. And in the film, he talks about how people should adopt these graves, regardless if you are the enemy or what. He says, What he told me, he says, you guys didn't just defeat Germany, you got our freedom back.
Right. I've heard the Dutch
have you ever
do
heard that
too.
before?
I've heard the Dutch take sponsor graves too.
The Dutch are fantastic. There's 8,300 graves there in Holland, and they get about 300 people a day, Dutch people, that visit those graves. And every grave has been adopted, because what a few of these cemeteries do, they have an organization where you adopt a grave, you get a certificate. I adopted a grave myself with another guy because I'm not there to put flowers there. With a Dutch person, he's co-adopter with me, but he's Dutch, but he's adopted graves in Belgium and France. Some of the guys, young guys, they do this. They have websites, and what they do is they find a family member, or through a newspaper, they get a picture of the veteran. How old was he? Where did he go to school? Married and getting kids. So they do history. It's the only way anybody knows anything about these people. And in Holland, they have pictures right there at the grave sites of the soldier. It's fantastic.
Mr. Ciampa, sadly, our time is up. Thank you, sir, very much for your time with us today, and especially for your service to our country.
You're welcome. Thank you.
George Ciampa is a U.S. Army veteran of World War II, served with the 607th Graves Registration Company, served at Normandy, served in the Bulge as well, and other places in the Western Theater of Europe. I'm Greg Corumbus, reporting for Veterans Chronicles.